Not unloved, not unappreciated, just unnoticed. Elena Reed had spent 5 years standing behind one of the most powerful men in the city, Jason Hale. She ran his world, held his chaos together, never asking for thanks, never needing the spotlight. But one night, at a quiet charity gala, she stepped onto the dance floor, alone. She didn't look for him. She didn't wait. And in that moment, the man who never missed a detail finally realized what he'd been blind to all along. Imagine being the reason someone succeeds, yet never being part of the story. What would you do? Would you keep waiting, quietly hoping to be seen? Or would you walk away, hoping they'd follow? This isn't a story about romance or revenge. It's about silence and the cost of never saying what matters most. It's about the moment you realize that love, without presence, is just another form of absence. If you've ever loved in silence, this story is for you. Like, share, and subscribe to help us bring more heartfelt stories to life. Now let's begin. It was the kind of night that made you forget it was fall in New York. The ballroom shimmered under soft amber lights, draped in ivory linen and late October elegance. Outside, the wind whispered across Fifth Avenue. Inside, wine flowed like a secret. Laughter floated like polished pearls, and everyone knew who Jason Hale was the moment he walked in. But Jason Hale didn't walk in. Not yet. He stood near the service hallway instead, half hidden behind a velvet partition, sipping from a glass of club soda he hadn't even asked for. He wasn't in the mood to be seen. Not tonight, not after the week he'd had. The Hale Foundation's annual benefit gala was, in theory, a celebration. In practice, it was a high-stakes chessboard. Donors, executives, politicians, and press, every one of them dressed in charm, cloaked in ambition. But none of that was what unsettled Jason. It was her, Elena Reed. She was on the dance floor, alone. It was not a performance. There was no showmanship, no glitter in her steps. Just a simple, elegant sway to the jazz quartet's slow rendition of At Last. She moved with grace, grounded in her own rhythm, unaware, or perhaps unbothered, by the eyes around her. She wasn't trying to be seen, and yet Jason couldn't look away. She wore a navy dress, not flashy, not fashionable, just her. Shoulders bare, hair in a low twist, with a few rebellious strands framing her face. It was a look he'd seen countless times, in countless meetings, but never like this. He had known Elena for nearly 5 years. She was a project manager with sharp instincts, steady hands, and the kind of integrity that made people either respect her or stay out of her way. She never raised her voice, never asked for credit, never brought emotion into work. In Jason's world of investors and calculated risk, she was the closest thing to calm he allowed himself. But this was new. There was something about watching her dance alone that felt intimate, almost too intimate, as if he had stumbled into a moment that was never meant to be witnessed. And it shook something in him he didn't want to name. Because Jason Hale, billionaire, innovator, Wall Street's golden boy, didn't believe in unscripted feelings. Everything in his world had a place, a function, an exit strategy. Until now. The applause was soft when the music ended, like polite punctuation. Elena dipped her head slightly, a quiet acknowledgement, then walked off the floor without fanfare. She passed by Jason's line of sight without noticing him. Or maybe she did. He couldn't tell. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just walked. But in that silence, Jason felt something he hadn't felt in years. Unseen. And somehow that mattered, more than he wanted to admit, more than he was ready to understand. Because if Elena Reed, who had built his world behind the scenes, could dance alone and not wait for anyone, maybe she had stopped waiting for him too. And that thought, that possibility, sank deeper than it should have. He straightened his tie, exhaled slowly, and finally walked into the ballroom. But the music had already changed, and Elena was already gone from the dance floor. The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp, sunlit quiet that only early autumn in Manhattan could bring. Outside the Hale Innovations headquarters, the city pulsed like always, cabs weaving, coffee lines forming, ambition humming beneath every polished shoe. Inside the 34th floor, Jason Hale walked into his office at exactly 7:43 a.m., and Elena Reed was already there. She always was. She stood by the long glass window, reviewing the latest project update on her tablet, back straight, hair in a familiar bun. On the table beside her, 2 coffee cups waited. His, black, no sugar, hers, with almond milk and a hint of cinnamon. It was a rhythm they'd never discussed, but never broke. "Good morning," Jason said, his voice even. "Morning," she replied, without looking up. She never mentioned the dance, and neither did he. For years, that had been their pattern: precision over presumption, function over feeling. She anticipated his meetings before they were on the calendar, filtered emails before they reached him, understood the way his mind worked in a way no one else had. Not even his former partners, not even his ex-wife. But there had always been a line: invisible, implied, invulnerable. Jason remembered the first time he met her, a Monday, February. She wore gray slacks and a navy blouse, nothing that stood out. But when she spoke, clear, firm, quietly confident, he knew she would be invaluable. What he hadn't expected was how quickly she became indispensable. He told himself it was her efficiency, her problem solving, the way she made entire departments move smoother just by adjusting their calendars. But deep down, he knew it was more. It was the way she made his world feel less chaotic. She never pried, never flattered, never acted like she needed him to notice. And maybe that was why he noticed. There were moments over the years that stood out more than he admitted. Like the time she stayed until 2 a.m. after a product recall and left a note with a single line: "You were right about the supply chain." Or the winter she came into the office the morning after her father's funeral, hair pinned back, face calm, not once mentioning where she'd been the day before. Or the way she always stepped aside when the press was around. Not shy, just private. Jason had built a life on control, data, trends, everything predictable, replicable. But Elena defied that in the gentlest way. She never made demands, never asked for more. She simply gave, day after day, without expecting anything in return. And he, like a fool, had come to expect it. Now, the memory of her dancing, alone, played on repeat in his mind like a record that refused to stop skipping. He cleared his throat, trying to shake it. "Elena," he said, his voice lower than intended. "That gala, did you enjoy it?" She looked up, surprised by the question. Then a pause. "I did." Another pause. "I needed it." Jason nodded, unsure what else to say. He wasn't good at asking, worse at explaining. But something inside him whispered that the line between them, whatever it had been, had shifted. And once that line moved, there was no going back. By the following week, the memory hadn't faded. If anything, it had embedded itself deeper, like a sliver of glass just beneath the skin. Not bleeding, not visible, but unmistakably there. Jason Hale sat alone in the quiet of his private office, blinds partially drawn, the soft hum of the air system the only sound in the room. He'd gone through 3 contract drafts that morning and couldn't remember a single clause. His mind, unwillingly, frustratingly, kept drifting back to her. Not just the dance, but something else. It was Monday afternoon. Elena had just stepped out after a call with their Tokyo partners, and Jason found himself watching the imprint of her coffee cup on the table. Still warm. He used to see her as an extension of his efficiency, the perfect right hand. But now he was realizing how many times she had filled the silence for him, not with words, but with presence. The warmth in the room when she entered, the calm she brought when things frayed at the edges. He closed the contract and leaned back, arms crossed. This was ridiculous. He was 56 years old, CEO of a billion-dollar tech firm. He had outmaneuvered entire markets, navigated hostile takeovers, testified before Congress, and now he was rattled by a woman dancing alone? Except it wasn't just the dance. It was what it meant. She hadn't looked around, hadn't waited for approval or company. She didn't dance for him, or for anyone. She danced for herself. And that unnerved him more than it should have. Because deep down, he hadn't realized she needed anything at all. He had come to rely on her so completely that he'd stopped noticing her humanity, her own needs, dreams, desires. She had made his world so seamless that he forgot she had a world of her own. And if she had one, where did that leave him? Later that evening, as he rode the elevator down alone, Jason caught his reflection in the mirrored doors. Tired eyes, stiff collar, the beginnings of gray at his temples. For the first time in years, he felt old. Not in age, in relevance. He exited into the marble lobby, nodded at the night guard, and stepped out into the evening chill. His driver waited at the curb, but Jason didn't get in. Instead, he walked. Block after block, coat collar turned up, hands in pockets, lost in the cold air and the rhythm of his thoughts. He thought about the first time she laughed at something he said. Not a forced smile, a real laugh. He remembered feeling startled, then oddly proud. He thought about the time she brought soup to his office during flu season. Silent, no words. Just left it on his desk, with a napkin folded neatly on the side. He thought about how he never said thank you. Not really. And now, he wondered if those silences had started to cost him more than he realized. When he finally arrived at his brownstone on the Upper East Side, the lights inside flickered on with automated precision. But the space felt too quiet, too perfect. He stood in the entryway for a long moment, listening to the absence of everything. And for the first time, he wondered if she had started to move away from him emotionally, long before she ever took that dance. Tuesday arrived, like it always did, early and impatient. Jason Hale entered the conference room at 9:02 a.m., nodding briefly to his team already gathered for the quarterly security briefing. Elena sat 3 seats down, tablet in hand, hair pulled back in her usual low knot. She looked composed, efficient, unshaken. But Jason saw it, the shift. It wasn't something anyone else would notice. Not the junior analysts, not the CTO. But he saw it, the way she didn't look up when he entered. The way her gaze didn't linger when she spoke. The way she no longer filled the space between them with quiet steadiness. There was a kind of absence that was louder than presence, and Jason heard it now. After the meeting, he caught up to her outside the elevators. Elena, he said, walking beside her, matching her pace. She glanced sideways. Yes? He hesitated. I've noticed you've been distant lately. Her brows lifted. Barely. I've been doing my job. I didn't mean professionally. The elevator arrived and she stepped in. He followed. The doors closed. Inside, the silence stretched. Finally, she spoke, softly, but without hesitation. You're noticing now. That's something. Jason looked at her, really looked, and saw the wear in her expression. Not exhaustion, but restraint. The kind you build after waiting too long for something to change. Before he could speak, her phone buzzed. She looked down, sighed, and turned toward the panel. I have a client call in 5. The elevator opened, and just like that, she was gone again. Jason remained inside. Let the doors close. Let the elevator carry him up with no clear destination. Later that day, Marcus Dwyer, his head of infrastructure, stepped into Jason's office, brow furrowed. We might have a problem, Marcus began, handing over a folder. Last week, someone accessed the internal client data network from an outside location, encrypted but flagged. Jason's attention snapped into focus. What location? A remote address. No breach, no damage. But here's the thing. Whoever did it used Elena's credentials. Silence. Jason's throat went dry. It might be a clone, or just a glitch, Marcus continued, but I thought you'd want to know. Jason nodded, keeping his expression unreadable. Thank you. Keep this internal for now. Marcus left. Jason sat back, staring at the folder on his desk. Her login. Her name. No evidence of wrongdoing. No reason to assume anything. But the timing, the coincidence, the doubt. It crept in like a draft through a window left open. He hated himself for it, but he couldn't ignore it either. That evening, Elena knocked on his office door just before 6. She handed over the week's projections. Detailed, clean, consistent. Anything else you need tonight? She asked, voice neutral. Jason looked at her for a long second. Number, that's all. She turned to leave. Elena, she paused, turned back. He opened his mouth, but the words refused to come. Suspicion, care, concern, they tangled together like wires crossed. And so, once again, he said nothing. She nodded once, eyes unreadable, and left. And Jason sat there alone, folder unopened, guilt blooming quietly in his chest. Wednesday came wrapped in rain. It wasn't the dramatic kind. No thunder, no lighting. Just a steady, whispering drizzle that blurred windows and made the city look like it was thinking too hard. Jason Hale sat behind his desk, a cup of untouched coffee cooling beside him. He had barely slept. The folder with Elena's login incident still sat on the edge of the desk, unopened but heavy. And then she knocked, software precise, the way she always did. Come in, he said, though his voice betrayed him. Low, worn thin. Elena stepped inside, holding a set of documents. She was wearing gray again. Rain darkened her sleeves, her hair slightly damp at the edges. Still composed, still Elena. I finalized the pitch deck for Friday's investor roundtable, she said. Would you like to review it now? Jason didn't look at the papers. He looked at her, and something in his expression stopped her mid-step. Elena, he said. She waited. There was an access breach last week. He began slowly, carefully. Someone used your credentials. Her face didn't change. I know, she said. That caught him off guard. You know? Marcus told me yesterday. Why didn't you say anything? She set the folder down. Because I wanted to see if you would. Silence fell between them. Thick. Humid. Unforgiving. Jason stood slowly, hands resting on the back of his chair. I didn't want to assume anything. But you did, she replied, voice calm but steady. You always do. Elena, it's not that I think you... She cut him off. You think I what? Sold our data? Played both sides? Lied to you? Jason took a breath. I don't know what to think. And that's the problem, isn't it? She said, stepping forward, voice trembling. Not with anger, but with something deeper. You don't know, because you never asked. He flinched. All these years, she continued, I've done everything to protect this company, to protect you. And the first sign of trouble, your first instinct is to question me. Jason's voice lowered, almost to a whisper. It's not about you, Elena. It's about control, security. I've been burned before. I'm not your past, she said. I know. Do you? Another silence, but this one burned. Elena turned away, one hand gripping the edge of the table. I danced alone that night, she said, because I needed to remind myself I could. Jason closed his eyes. I waited, Jason, she added. I waited for years for something more than polite professionalism, and I finally stopped waiting. He opened his mouth, but the words, always calculated, always careful, died on his tongue. I can't keep working in a place where I'm only trusted when everything is going right, she said, voice now quieter. Where my loyalty is invisible until questioned. Jason took a slow step forward. I trust you. She turned, meeting his eyes, hurt and resolute. Then say it when it matters. And with that, she left the office. Jason didn't stop her. He stood there, in the middle of the room, the rain tapping faintly on the glass behind him, and realized something that shook him to his core. He hadn't just failed to trust her, he'd failed to see her. Thursday unfolded with a stillness that didn't match the city's usual rhythm. The office moved on, phones rang, meetings happened, coffee was brewed. But for Jason Hale, time had stalled. Elena hadn't come in that morning. No message, no delay notice, just absence. He told himself she needed a day, that this wasn't new, that she would be back. But deep down, he wasn't sure. At 3:17 p.m., Marcus stepped into his office, quiet and hesitant. I know it's not my place, Marcus said, but I thought you should see this. He placed a slim envelope on Jason's desk, a memo. One Jason had signed 2 years ago. Jason opened it, frowning, until he recognized what it was. A disbursement slip. From the Hale Foundation's Discretionary Education Fund, $48,000. Allocated under the Emerging Women in STEM grant. Recipient, Miguel Reed, Elena's younger brother. Jason remembered that decision. Vividly. It was late. Elena had just left for the day. He'd overheard her on a quiet phone call a few nights before, speaking softly in the hallway, telling her mother not to worry, that they'd find a way to cover Miguel's tuition, that everything would be okay. Jason hadn't said anything then. Instead, he had created a scholarship line, hidden under a general fund, approved it without a word, anonymous, no recognition, no signature. He had thought he was helping. He never told her. And now? Marcus cleared his throat. She found out yesterday. One of our interns organizing the foundation files flagged the grant name. Elena saw the paperwork. Jason's heart sank. She left early after that. That evening, Jason sat in his penthouse. Lights dimmed. The envelope on the table in front of him. He didn't touch his drink. Didn't turn on the news. Didn't move for a long time. Because for the first time in his life, an act of care had become a wound. He'd helped without asking, gave without trust, stepped in like a rescuer instead of a partner. And Elena, who had never asked for rescue, now probably felt like she'd been handled, owned. He had meant it as kindness, but what she might see now was control. And that difference, that line between love and control, had always been the one he struggled with. When his wife left 10 years ago, she'd said something Jason had dismissed at the time. You don't help people. You manage them. And maybe Elena had just discovered the same. His chest tightened. He wanted to fix this, but he didn't know how. Because if he told her now, it might feel like a tactic, a defense, a strategy to win her back. And he didn't want to win. He just wanted her to understand. But more than anything, he wanted her to believe he meant it, not as leverage, not as a secret power play, but as something real, something good, something she never had to earn. That night, the city outside Jason Hale's apartment moved as it always did. Cabs weaving, horns blaring, lives colliding in neon and noise. But inside, everything was still. Jason sat at his oak writing desk, a piece of stationery in front of him, blank, untouched. His fingers hovered over the pen. He had never written a personal letter in his life. Memos, sure. Contracts, presentations, investor reports, yes. But a handwritten letter? That was something other people did. People who weren't afraid of the wrong words. But tonight, for the first time in years, he didn't want a script. He wanted the truth. So he began to write. Elena, if you're reading this, I've done what I should have done a long time ago. I'm not good at saying things out loud, not the real things. But I want you to know, I saw you from the beginning. I saw you when you fixed entire departments without asking for credit. When you stayed late without being asked. When you made my world work in ways I never acknowledged. I saw you carry everything and never ask for help. And maybe that's why I thought I could help you without asking. The scholarship, it was me. I heard you on the phone that night. You didn't know I was listening. You were tired. But even then, you were reassuring everyone but yourself. I wanted to take something off your shoulders. I thought if I did it quietly, it would feel like respect. But I see now how wrong that was. Because respect isn't silence, and care isn't secrecy. You were never someone who needed saving. You were someone who deserved to be asked, what do you need? I never asked. And for that, I'm sorry. Not because it backfired. Not because I've lost your trust. But because you deserved more than what I gave you. You always did. I don't know what happens next. I'm not asking you to come back. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to hear me. Without strategy. Without polish. Without the armor I've worn for so long. You changed me. And I hope, even if only for a moment, I made your world lighter too. Jason. He folded the paper slowly, slid it into an envelope, and wrote her name on the front. No company letterhead, no return address, just Elena. He didn't seal it yet. Instead, he sat in silence, the letter in his hands, and let the weight of 5 years settle fully into his chest. And for the first time in his adult life, Jason Hale didn't have a plan. He only had a hope. Doi jai la fantamqua kao chuyen. She danced alone, and the billionaire finally saw her. Fan. Friday morning arrived with a cold clarity, the kind of day where even the sun seemed uncertain. Jason Hale walked into his office just after 7 a.m., sharp as ever in his gray suit, but his expression betrayed him. Not anxious, not tired, just waiting. He had left the letter on Elena's desk the night before. No text, no explanation, just an envelope with her name. Her chair was still empty. Her desk, immaculate. Coffee mug washed and turned upside down on its coaster. A yellow notepad with half a to-do list written in her signature, slanted handwriting. It felt less like an absence and more like a goodbye. Jason didn't know if she'd read the letter. He didn't know if she'd even seen it. But the not knowing gnawed at him. He checked his messages. Nothing. He checked again. Still nothing. At 8:02 a.m., Thomas Keene, board liaison, walked in with a tight expression. "You might want to be ready," Thomas said. "Keller from Martech is making noise again." Jason raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "Rumors. Investor concerns. They're saying the data breach involved internal mishandling. Elena's name came up." Jason's chest went still. "She's not the source," he said evenly. "I know that," Thomas replied. "But Jason, we're in a fragile position, and you've been distracted." Jason said nothing, just stared at the skyline outside, where the sun was trying to break through low clouds. That afternoon, the tension boiled over. In a closed-door meeting with 3 board members, Jason was asked, politely but pointedly, whether his personal entanglements were compromising operational judgment. They didn't name Elena directly, but they didn't have to. He defended her, calmly, firmly, without raising his voice. "She's the reason our product rollout didn't implode last spring. She's the one who caught the vendor irregularities last quarter. And if there's anyone I trust with classified systems, it's Elena Reed." "But trust," one board member replied, "isn't always enough." Later that evening, long after the office had emptied, Jason stood in the shadow of the conference room, watching the city pulse beneath him. He thought of her again, of the way she used to stand at this very window during late nights, one hand on her hip, eyes scanning through spreadsheets, mind 3 steps ahead of everyone. She belonged here, not just because she was brilliant, but because this place was different when she was in it. And now, she was gone, maybe for good. He didn't know if the letter would reach her the way he meant it to. He didn't know if he deserved for it to. But he did know this: if she didn't come back, the cost wouldn't be just personal, it would be structural. The company might survive without her, but he wouldn't. Not in the same way. Not as the man he was becoming. 2 days later, the ballroom looked exactly the same. The chandeliers still shimmered like frozen rain. The music, another slow jazz piece, spilled softly across the floor. The guests, polished and poised, moved in practiced grace between the bar and the dance floor. But to Jason Hale, everything felt different, because this time, he wasn't behind a velvet curtain. He was out in the open, waiting, no bourbon in hand, no tie choking his collar, just him, still, focused, present. It was a fundraising dinner for a community education initiative, a project Elena had once pitched and Jason had quietly funded. He hadn't planned to attend, but something told him she might. He didn't know why. He just hoped. And then, just past the second course, she walked in. Elena, her hair down this time. Simple dress, no statement pieces, no entourage, just her. She didn't scan the room like before, but their eyes met almost instantly, and Jason stood. He didn't move toward her, didn't make a scene. He simply waited. She walked slowly through the crowd, past murmured greetings and polite nods. When she reached him, neither of them spoke at first. Not because there was nothing to say, but because for once, they both understood what silence meant. "You're here," he said, voice quiet. She smiled, faintly, not with certainty, but with familiarity. "I got your letter." Jason nodded. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I'd read it. And? She exhaled. It didn't fix everything, but it told me what I needed to know. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small envelope. Not sealed, no words on the front, just folded parchment. Jason took it, opened it. Inside was a single line, handwritten in her looping script. Next time, ask. He looked up, and for the first time in a very long time, he smiled without guarding it. They stood there, surrounded by the hum of conversations and clinking glasses, but nothing else mattered. Finally, Jason extended his hand. Would you like to dance? Elena looked at it, then at him, and for the first time, she didn't hesitate. She placed her hand in his, and together they stepped onto the dance floor. No spotlight, no audience, just two people learning to move. Finally, in rhythm. 2 days later, the ballroom looked exactly the same. The chandeliers still shimmered like frozen rain. The music, another slow jazz piece, spilled softly across the floor. The guests, polished and poised, moved in practiced grace between the bar and the dance floor. But to Jason Hale, everything felt different. Because this time, he wasn't behind a velvet curtain. He was out in the open, waiting. No bourbon in hand, no tie choking his collar, just him. Still, focused, present. It was a fundraising dinner for a community education initiative, a project Elena had once pitched and Jason had quietly funded. He hadn't planned to attend, but something told him she might. He didn't know why. He just hoped. And then, just past the second course, she walked in. Elena, her hair down this time, simple dress, no statement pieces, no entourage, just her. She didn't scan the room like before, but their eyes met almost instantly, and Jason stood. He didn't move toward her, didn't make a scene. He simply waited. She walked slowly through the crowd, past murmured greetings and polite nods. When she reached him, neither of them spoke at first, not because there was nothing to say, but because for once they both understood what silence meant. You're here, he said, voice quiet. She smiled, faintly, not with certainty, but with familiarity. I got your letter. Jason nodded. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I'd read it. And? She exhaled. It didn't fix everything, but it told me what I needed to know. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small envelope. Not sealed. No words on the front. Just folded parchment. Jason took it. Opened it. Inside was a single line, handwritten in her looping script. Next time, ask. He looked up, and for the first time in a very long time, he smiled without guarding it. They stood there, surrounded by the hum of conversations and clinking glasses, but nothing else mattered. Finally, Jason extended his hand. Would you like to dance? Elena looked at it, then at him, and for the first time, she didn't hesitate. She placed her hand in his, and together they stepped onto the dance floor. No spotlight, no audience, just two people learning to move. Finally, in rhythm. The office didn't change overnight. There were still meetings, still numbers, still early mornings and 2 late nights. But something had shifted, not in the layout, in the people. Elena returned to her desk, not with ceremony, but with quiet purpose. She no longer answered Jason's questions before he asked them. She waited. And Jason, he learned to ask. He stopped assuming silence meant agreement, stopped believing loyalty meant invisibility. They didn't talk about the letter again. They didn't need to, because it had done what words often fail to do. It opened a door, and neither of them had closed it since. A few weeks later, Elena stopped by Jason's office just before sunset. The city outside glowed amber, buildings casting long shadows across the glass. "I thought you should see this," she said, handing him a folder. It was the first draft of a new mentorship initiative for first-generation college students pursuing tech careers. Jason flipped through it. His eyes paused at the last page. A quote, handwritten in the margins: "Visibility is the first act of care." He looked up. Elena smiled. "It's not just about scholarships anymore. It's about showing up." Jason nodded. "I'll fund the entire program." "No," she said gently. "We'll fund it. Together." He smiled. No protest. No deflection. Just yes. That night, Jason found himself walking home instead of calling his driver. The cold had returned. Late November had crept in quietly. The streets sparkled faintly with early lights. He stopped by a bench near the park, sat down, and let the air fill his lungs. For so long, he had built his world on silence, because silence felt safe, predictable, controlled. But in doing so, he had missed so much. The touch of gratitude left unsaid. The warmth of presence left unacknowledged. The cost of not asking the people closest to you, "What do you need?" And maybe, just maybe, that was the deeper message of it all. That love, real love, isn't about protecting others from pain. It's about showing up even when you're afraid, speaking up even when it's awkward, listening even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. We don't all get the timing right. Sometimes we love too quietly. Sometimes we help without asking. Sometimes we wait until someone is already halfway out the door before we speak. But if we're lucky, if we're honest, if we learn, we get a second chance. Not to erase what we missed, but to build something better. From truth, from trust, from finally being seen. Epilogue. Note to readers: if this story reminded you of someone you once waited for, or someone who waited for you, don't wait for the perfect moment. Say it, even if it's clumsy, even if it's late, even if it's hard. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can offer isn't love or money or help. It's your truth. Spoken out loud before the moment is gone. This story reminds us that presence is more than proximity. It's attention, it's care, and most importantly, it's choosing to speak, especially when the words are hard. Many of us, especially as we grow older, learn to carry love quietly. We believe actions will speak for us. We tell ourselves the people we care for must know how we feel. But the truth is, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're waiting for us to ask, to notice, to simply say, "You matter to me." Jason Hale learned this too late, but not so late that it couldn't still matter. So here's the lesson. Don't wait until the room is empty to say what's in your heart. Call the friend. Apologize. Say thank you. Say I see you. Because love doesn't always need a grand gesture. Sometimes it just needs to be heard. Thank you for sharing your time with this story. If it touched something in your heart, if you saw even a small piece of yourself in Jason or Elena, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing stories that speak to the quiet truths we often carry inside. Until next time, take care and never leave the important things unsaid.